Katie, or just we assume that has started? Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, thank you all for attending this virtual meeting of the Economy, Transport and Environment Decision Day. The meeting is being webcast on YouTube via the County Council website. Now, we've got quite a long agenda today. We've got 12 papers. We don't have any deputations today, but Councillor David Simpson is present and will be speaking on various papers, and I'll call him to speak on the ones that he's notified to do so. We also have Councillor Russell Oppenheiner, who is the chair of the Select Committee, and he may wish to comment on some of the agenda items. I would just like to make a comment before we start. When we get to each agenda item, I will ask Stuart Jarvis, the Director of Economy, Transport and Environment, to just sort of open each paper, and then we can comment on it afterwards. But I just would like to make a point at this stage that all the papers, or most of them, have been considered by the Select Committee, as they would have done normally if we'd have been in a room separately. They've gone through the same process prior to this, and many of the papers have been debated and discussed and discussions with local members. So there's been a long process to get to this point. I just would like to make that clear. So what we'll do, we'll move straight on to agenda item 1, which is the Recycling and Single Materials Recovery Facility, the MRF update. And I'd like to ask Stuart to open the paper, please, Stuart. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. With your permission, I'll pass to James to do this item by way of introduction.
Okay, that's great. James, would you just like to introduce yourself and then present the paper?
Thank you very much, Chairman. James Potter, Assistant Director for Waste Planning and Environment. A quick summary of the paper. It sets out some of the historical context for waste in Hampshire and the way we're operating. Looks at the current performance by the various Hampshire authorities, and also sort of sets out some of the national position with regards to progress on the Environment Bill and the Resources of Waste strategy. As a consequence of a desire by all authorities in Hampshire to improve our recycling performance, we've been looking at the options available to us, and that led us to consider the opportunity for a single MRF rather than the two that we currently operate, but an expanded MRF that enabled us to recycle a wider range of materials. Having asked our contractor to, if we say, price such a facility, and then having done some modelling based on that price, we come to the conclusion that the cost of that facility would be 4.6 million over the life of the contract, as opposed to the aspiration set against our transformation programs of an annual saving of roughly 3 million. So in light of that, we are also then setting out in the paper a desire to look at alternative options, namely those twin stream or curbside sort collection processes that would need different infrastructure to support them. This is part of the work that's been undertaken for the Hampshire Waste Partnership Initiative, and looks at the three recycling systems that the government are proposing. Having considered, done some work, there are sort of refer you to graphs 2 and 3 in the report that indicate that it isn't so much the recycling collection system itself that derives the increase in performance. It's more to do with, should we say, any other restrictions on residual waste capacity, be that limiting the container size or more significantly reducing the frequency of collection that seems to drive an increase in recycling performance. We've also looked at the sort of the carbon implications of the three options to see if there was any significant difference. And again, it bears out the same result, is that it's not necessarily the collection system itself, but it's the residual waste collections that derive you more significant carbon benefits. Having said that, we are now asking our contractor Veolia to review the infrastructure requirements of both the twin stream collection service and a curbside sort collection service, and that would include looking at existing infrastructure around the transfer station network and the delivery points that we have, which will need to change significantly to accept and segregate a wider range of materials at those facilities. Having said that, we are also aware that food waste is shall we say, something that's coming forward in the Environment Bill as when that is passed, that will require mandatory separate weekly collection. And we are also seeking to work with our district partners to try and understand the implications of that, both in terms of collection service, infrastructure, implications on material flows, and again, also the implications of being able to receive that material at the recycling centre networks. So the recommendations are: one, on the basis of the information from the modelling we've done, that we pause the work on the single MRF whilst we are able to do the additional work to understand the infrastructure requirements for twin stream or curbside sort options. And recommendation 2 is setting out some of the principles by which we want to continue to work with our partners, districts and unitary partners, ensuring that in these, shall we say, financially restricted times, that the County Council doesn't put itself in a position where it is negatively impacted by any of the decisions that it might make, notwithstanding that we would seek to, shall we say, implement an environmentally and sustainable solution that gives the Hampshire residents the best service possible.
Thank you very much, James. And it's clear, sort of with a ever-changing picture at the moment, we need to understand some further detail before we can make some of these decisions. Councillor Oppenheimer, would you like to make comment as chair of the Select Committee?
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I would. We had a good discussion yesterday at the Select Committee. This is a complex subject, and I think the paper actually manages to explain it very clearly. So I think credit to Sam and to James for producing such a clear paper. We all know that Project Integra is going to need replacing quite soon with a new system. There is a lot of public interest in improving recycling in Hampshire, and that's acknowledged in the paper. And I know that to be true. All councillors do. We get emails about recycling a lot. And whenever any slight thing is changed, a lot of the public will have comments to make about that. But certainly, improving recycling performance is an important issue for Hampshire. I think the government's done everything it can up to now. The December 2018 strategy is a very ambitious strategy. I think we're right to support it. The government's been consulting, and we have to now wait and see exactly what system they're going to go for, how prescriptive they will be. So there's uncertainty about that. There's uncertainty about what amendments might be made to the Environment Bill. And of course, the COVID crisis adds further uncertainty on top of all of that. So it seems to me, and it seemed to most of us on the committee yesterday, that all we can do in Hampshire is continue to research different options, not commit ourselves to anything, assess what the implications and the cost implications and the carbon implications, very important, are going to be, and wait for clarity to come from government. So I think, I think we're being given the right advice here in a nutshell, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Russell. That was very useful. And as you say, there was a very thorough debate yesterday. Councillor Simpson, you wanted to make comment on this agenda item?
No, I'm fine, thank you. We did most of this yesterday, as Russell has said. We went through it. A number of questions were asked and answered. I had one I forgot to ask is, how does the new ERF at Alton affect this? But realistically, that's going to be answered as they work through the options anyway.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Simpson. I think that would be the case. We need to understand where we are, and I think the paper sets out very clearly what we need to do right now. That was something that will be added in almost, as we progress that. Stuart, would you like to add any further comments?
No, Chairman, only really just to say, in answer to Councillor Simpson's comment there, of course, the proposal that he referred to is at the early stage of a planning application process, and it is a purely commercial proposal, as I understand it, by Veolia, so it wouldn't be affecting the paper that James has written, which relates to our role in terms of municipal waste and recycling.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that, and thanks, James, for presenting that. I know, like all these papers, a great deal of work and effort goes into them. And as I said, when we have an ever-changing picture at the moment, I think this is the correct procedure to be following at this stage, and we'll see how things go forward from there. So unless there is any further comment, and I don't think anybody is indicating now, I'm very happy, Katie, to accept the recommendations as set out on page 5 and 6 of the report. That's recommendations 2 and 3. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. So we'll move straight on to agenda item 2, which is the Brighton Hill Improvement Scheme, the Camrose Link Road. It's a project appraisal and advanced enabling work. Stuart, would you like to intro the paper? You're on mute, Stuart.
I was flipping between windows. My apologies, Chairman. Yes, briefly, the purpose of this report, there are two aspects to it. Effectively, the report is seeking project appraisal approval for the Camrose Link Road element of the scheme, which is a related and integral part of the Brighton Hill proposals, but also functions in a standalone capacity. And it's timely that your approval is sought at this stage for a project appraisal in relation to that scheme, Chairman, albeit, of course, and the very important caveat that is dependent on the outcome of the planning process, both with the County Council and indeed with Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council relating to that overall site. The report also mentions that we have been doing further consultation work on the main Brighton Hill scheme itself, and in particular in relation to the issue of subways. And it is intended, Chairman, to bring a further project appraisal to your decision day in the autumn, where we've had proper opportunity to consider the responses to the consultation and what implications that might have for the recommendations we make on the scheme. And the consultation period only finished right at the end of June. So it was felt it would have been, it simply wasn't possible to complete that work and incorporate that in this report, Chairman. So that was all I was going to say by way of introduction on this one.
Okay, thank you for that. I have nobody down to speak on this one. So I'd just like to say, in terms of what this enables us to do is to progress with the overall scheme and sort of acknowledging that this is in partnership with Basingstoke and Dean Council as well. And with that, some of that is dependent on the Planning Commission. But it's as all these papers, an enormous amount of work, but pleased to see this and pleased to see that we are progressing. So I don't have any other further comments. I can't see anybody else indicating to speak. So I'm very happy to accept the recommendations as set out on page 23 and 24. Okay, great, thank you. So we'll now move on to agenda item 3, which is the Lynchfield Road Farnborough Growth Package update report. Stuart, I don't know if you're doing this or somebody else.
I'm happy to introduce it, Chairman. I do also have both Keith Wilcox and particularly David Wilson are available in the event that we need to discuss more detail on the scheme. And David, I know, is very close to the details on it. Yeah. Effectively, Chairman, this is seeking your permission to develop an alternative design option for the Lynchford Road Improvement Scheme, which you had previously approved. And the proposal to bring this alternative option forward for consideration really relates to some of the comments and feedback we've had from the local community. And I know, Chairman, this is something that you've also been closely involved in. And indeed, you and I had a meeting with Rushmore Borough Council very recently at which we discussed the proposals at Lynchford Road. So it was felt that it was appropriate to have a further look at design options to see whether some of the comments that had been made in relation to the existing scheme that had been designed for Lynchford Road, whether we could find a way of altering the design to give more opportunity to address some of the local concerns or comments that had been raised, but particularly by local businesses, but also by local residents. And our initial technical work did indicate that it was possible to come up with an alternative design that protected most of the significant transport benefits of the original proposal, but allowed more scope to consider some of the other issues and respond to some of the comments along the lines I've indicated. And therefore, Chairman, we're seeking your approval to further develop and test through engagement with key stakeholders, including local community representatives, the alternative design proposals to see whether or not they find favour, and indeed in further testing whether they protect the benefits of the original scheme. I should also say, Chairman, and I know you're aware of this, that we are relating the work on the Lynchford Road scheme with the potential to develop a more innovative approach to traffic management measures in the North Camp area. One of the key prerequisites for which is that the strategic route becomes attractive enough to through traffic that it no longer we no longer see such volumes of through traffic using the residential area, which would then facilitate what I think would be quite an innovative and cutting edge set of proposals, which I know Rushmore Borough Council are very keen on, and I believe the local residents are very supportive of, Chairman. That was all I wish to say by way of introduction.
No, thank you for that, Stuart. I'll make a few comments at the end, but Councillor Simpson, David, you wanted to comment on this paper? You're still on mute.
It's now gone off, yes.
Right, okay.
Thanks. The feedback I'm getting is that this is welcome, move in the correct direction. I'm being asked still, is there a possibility that they can look at a scheme that came up some years ago, which was to connect Allison Road to what we call the Old Shot Relief Road, the A331, I think, which is further down towards Aldershot, and therefore would take most of the traffic away from North Camp and give them the relief that they require up there. Not saying it should be good, it should be done. I know there were exhibitions done in the past, and what I'm saying is, could we at least look at what was previously done, and is it a possibility that we may decide to go that way instead?
Okay, understand. I don't know if Keith or David Wilson want to comment on that. Oh, Stuart, sorry, Stuart, I see your hand up. Stuart, comment.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Councillor Simpson did raise this question with me very helpfully in our pre-meeting briefing, which allowed me to do a little bit of research with David and his team. I can confirm that we have looked at that scheme in the past, Councillor Simpson, as you quite rightly suggest. It's in part dependent on the completion of a new slip road access to the Blackwater Valley Relief Road, which is to be done as part of the development in that area at Wellesley, but there would be a significant detour involved in offering that as an alternative to Lynchford Road. So whilst I don't think we would rule out the possibility of looking at that, particularly as a potential for relieving further the through traffic pressure on North Camp, I don't think it's a realistic alternative to the Lynchford Road scheme, in the sense that it would involve quite a significantly long diversion, which would therefore be likely to be unattractive to traffic. It would be over 4 miles, I think I'm right in saying, the figures that I saw yesterday.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. David, you're looking like you might wish to ask another question.
Well, it was the 4 miles through me. I think he's talking about a round trip, because it's about a mile, 3/4 of a mile from Lynchford Road. So, yeah, if you were to think of a big roundabout, then possibly. As long as it's going to be looked at, yeah, and the officers are open to the idea that it may come up as a viable alternative and that we can do something, then that's great.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. I think Stuart's nodding. He's given the assurance that that will be the case. that's really why we're going back and revisiting now, because we've listened and we've learned, and we're prepared to have another look. I would at this point also like to mention and thank the North Camp support group. They sent some comments in on the 30th of June, and just to reassure them, all those comments that they made and points they made have been considered, and I'll certainly consider those in determining the paper today. Stuart, also you mentioned that we had gone to see Rushville Borough Council and some of their members. I've indeed been up there several times and met with county councillors and with borough councillors and with the businesses. And I think it's from the outcome from those meetings that we decided that we could have another look. So I think we've listened to their concerns, we're having a look, but we still need to remember that the original proposal is still on the table. We do need to see that this scheme, is deliverable and can work as well. So I think it's a good process we're going through. I'm pleased we have, and I certainly know the local members are very pleased. And like you said, other organisations are pleased that we're having another look. And it does seem to have a lot of support at the moment for us doing that. So I'm very pleased with it, and I'm therefore happy to no further comments. I'm happy to accept the recommendations as set out on page 41 and 42. Recommendations 1 through to 4. Katie, thank you very much. Thank you.
And Chairman, I should also just add, if I may, that we have made arrangements, and David Wilson and his team will be meeting the North Camp residents later on this month to begin the engagement process. That's
very useful, Stuart. Thank you very much. Yes, that was remiss of me. I should have mentioned that. And there are some dates, I believe, already agreed, as you say, that they're going to be doing that. Okay, so we'll now move on to agenda item 4, the Wheels to Work loan scheme. Are you just opening that, Stuart?
I'm happy to, Chairman. It's again, if there's further comments or any questions, I'm sure Keith Wilcox would be able to advise. But briefly, Chairman, this is just seeking your authority to renew what has been a very successful and very proactive and positive approach that the County Council's taken over a number of years to supporting young people with improving mobility so they get access to education and employment through a Wheels to Work scheme involving mopeds. We participate actively. The scheme's targeted mainly at the bigger rural areas of Hampshire and in partnership with the district councils. And this paper seeks your authority to maintain the scheme by re-procuring the arrangements with a partner to deliver that. I just, Chairman, in addition to everything it says in the report, just wanted to also add that we will be looking to take every opportunity to upgrade the provision of vehicles in line with our emerging transport policy of sort of particularly looking to promote cleaner vehicle engines, and we will be looking at the options that there might be as the procurement exercise takes us forward around whether we can sort of do a little bit further to improve air quality in Hampshire through this scheme.
Yeah, understand. All right, thank you very much, Stuart. Councillor Simpson, David, you wanted to make a comment on this paper?
I think this is a great scheme. I remember when it came up before, and I'm just so sorry that more districts and boroughs in the county haven't taken it up. Hopefully we can advertise it a bit more to them, and they will do, because especially in rural areas where buses are virtually non-existent, it would allow younger people to get to work in their first jobs and maybe second. It's a brilliant scheme, and please approve it straight away.
Okay, right. I agree with you absolutely. I was involved with Winchester and we went through the scheme. I'm a big fan of it and a supporter of it, and I agree it would be nice to see that other districts and boroughs taking this up as well. And there might be something that we can do there to encourage them. I'm not sure. That's something that, Stuart, we might be able to think about maybe.
Absolutely, Chairman, yes.
Right. Okay, so I don't have any further comments. So happy to accept the recommendations as set out on page 49 and 50. That would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7, Katie. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so move on to agenda item 5. My technology doesn't let me down. Okay, so we're now moving on to the Household Waste Recycling Centre cross-border update. So I don't know who's presenting that one.
I was going to ask James to present that one, Chairman, to give you a break from my voice for a bit.
Okay, thank you. James.
Thank you, Chairman. This paper is an update on the cross-border usage and also tries to resolve some of the outstanding issues. You will recall that the policy or our proposed policy on cross-border usage has been in place for quite a while, but for one reason or another, we've never necessarily been able to implement it. Part of that has been for technical reasons with regards to our desire to do an e-permit scheme for residents to make it as simple as possible for them. We are now have about 350,000 households registered, and we will be seeking to, shall we say, persuade the rest to do so shortly. But what we want to do after having to delay the original introduction of this in April is now to bring this system forward and introduce it from the 1st of August, but with a soft launch for 3 months whilst residents get used to it, and anyone who hasn't had the opportunity to sign up can do so during the early stages of that. The other issues that we want to resolve through the paper are some of the arrangements we have with West Berkshire and the historic usage of the Newbury Recycling Centre by some of our residents in the northeast of the county. This has been a transitional arrangement that's been in place for some time. Again, because it's linked to the introduction of the cross-border charging scheme, we haven't as yet brought that to an end, and so we are now seeking to terminate the arrangements with West Berkshire as of the 31st of July this year. The other element of the paper that we are looking to progress and also then get your delegated authority to Stuart to, should we say, conclude, is we've been approached by Dorset and potentially another neighbouring authority with regards to whether they could make payments to us rather than us directly charge their residents. Particularly relevant for Dorset because the Summerley HWRC on the county boundaries is a known service gap for Dorset, and therefore they would prefer to pay us directly rather than for us to charge their residents. We have been in negotiation with them and have agreed, based on the principles set out in the paper, a way forward. And again, the recommendation is to allow Stuart to conclude those discussions, but also open them up to any other neighbouring authorities who may be interested in pursuing a similar arrangement. I will leave it.
Thank you, James, very much. Councillor Simpson, David, you wanted to make a comment on this agenda item.
Thank you, Rob. For me, this is a pure national government failure. It is an absolute nonsense that when we're looking at climate change across the country, across the world, that we're forcing people, and I apologise for that, let me just stop that, I hope. So when we're looking at climate change across the world, we're telling people they have to travel further than the closest tip. It's a nonsense, and government should be leading and sorting it out. It's not just us, every waste disposal authority in the country is looking at the way government is doing the financing and other things, and naturally they're saying, well, we can't afford to subsidise to this extent, no matter where it is. We really do need to press the government harder on this to make sure that something gets sorted out. So why should we actually have two tips also, potentially within a mile of each other, because they're across the county border? It's a nonsense. It needs to be.
Thank you, David. First of all, just going to mention that Councillor Hayley Eachus, she sent some notes in. She's the Cabinet Member for Environment Enforcement at Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council, and it was just to assure her I have seen her comments and also considered all those comments when looking into the recommendations on the paper. To answer your comments, David, really, I have been to London on various occasions, meeting ministers along with the previous leader, Councillor Perry, and with Stuart, and went forward with proposals to how we could potentially look at cross-border charging. And we have tried very hard. So I think I would like to say that Hampshire has tried to lead on this. Many other authorities have actually decided to prevent Hampshire residents from attending, when we tried to find a solution. So I just want to assure you from that point of view, Hampshire and all the officers had worked extremely hard. Have you got the telephone exchange in your house, Councillor Simpson, or are you?
It would appear I've got two
Okay.
phones near me that I didn't
Yeah.
realise were here.
I wouldn't like to think Deliveroo.
Different phones.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem. So it was really just it's to reassure you that we have tried very hard as authority to get agreement with other authorities and lobby, central government on those points as well. And we should continue to do that. What I would also like, we are now also in discussion very briefly, just comment on that. I know it's at very early stages, but probably just a sort of a very brief outline of the potential discussions that we might go forward with them.
Certainly, Chairman. Yes, I believe that Southampton are not currently planning to implement the booking system for the HWRC, and as a result of that, they're looking at alternative ways of managing demand at that site. As you know, Chairman, context, therefore, Chairman, of Southampton's decision to look at the arrangements for access to their own HWRC. I believe that we need to review the position in relation to the Southampton, so we will work with them. I know my team have been in close contact with Southampton over the last 24 hours to establish what they're looking at doing, and we will need to review the position about what happens with that site and also with access to the Hampshire sites. But I would suggest that would very much be in the context of existing county council policy. So I'm assuming, Chairman, that we wouldn't be looking to exclude Southampton residents from Hampshire sites, but the cross-boundary policy may come into effect. But of course, we also have an existing raft of financial and contractual arrangements with our friends in Southampton and Portsmouth relating to the waste service. And I think we would look to review the position with Southampton in the context of all of those policies.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll say this is very early stages, but I think it just highlights almost from Councillor Simpson's points. So we've got Portsmouth agreeing actually now wanting to join our scheme, and then we're in discussions with other authorities how we take that forward. So it sort of enforces his point and my point, David, if I may as well, about we need some sort of universal agreement, which I'm going to repeat that we have tried very hard to do. So thank you for that, Stuart. Appreciate that. I don't know if Councillor Oppenheimer, did you have any comments on this as it sort of relates to your previous comments on the other paper as well?
I share your sentiments entirely, Chairman. I think Hampshire has tried as hard as we possibly can. We're a big county with lots of borders, and it would have been nice if we had agreed a mutual system with our neighbouring councils. But we are where we are, and therefore I think, as you say, we have to proceed with this charging structure.
Okay. Thank you. Stuart, I want to come back.
Yeah, just one more comment, if I may, Chairman. It really underlining the point Councillor Simpson was making about the need for a sort of national government-led solution on this. Of course, not all local authorities provide the same level of HWRC service, and not all the costs are equal as well. And that does make it fiendishly complicated to try to resolve this at an individual local authority level, as Councillor Simpson said. So it really does need national action by government, and I know you've been an energetic proponent of solutions on that, and I'm sure that will continue.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. And it's also sort of noted in the paper, of course, that James mentioned earlier, that we sort of suspended the introduction of the number plate recognition, the NPR, because of the COVID crisis. The paper clearly states out how we're going to take that forward now. I'm absolutely sure it was right to do that at the time, so we didn't have sort of conflicting information going out, what we're trying to do to cope with the pandemic, and also the introduction of that system. But I'm pleased to see that is going to be, starts again, or it will do, and just reminding everybody that they do need to register ready in time for when we take that forward. Can't see anybody indicating else to speak. So thank you, everybody, for their input into that paper. And Katie, happy to accept the recommendations as set out on page 57, I believe, and 58 through from number 2 through to number 7. Thank you, Katie. Okay, so now we move on to agenda item 6, which is the procurement approval for the geotechnical and geo-environmental services framework. I don't know who's introducing that, Stuart.
Well, I don't think anybody could top that introduction, Chairman, but effectively this is seeking your approval to roll forward the arrangements for securing specialist geotechnical geo-environmental services to support the design and development of schemes work that we do. Because we do this by bringing in specialist outside expert support, we need to renew the arrangements under our procurement operations, and this is really a continuation of what has been a very successful arrangement, but it needs to be re-procured, and this report seeking your authority to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. I have nobody down to speak on this. The only thing I would say is I think it does demonstrate the wide range sort of services and duties that we carry out as an authority. Probably a lot of people don't realise that we do this type of work and that we have to do it to assist us in things like maintaining, the 1,500 bridges we have and other services, and in terms of flooding and drains and inspections and all this sort of work we do as well. So it's an important part of some of the duties that the County Council have to provide. So I'm very happy to accept the recommendations as set out on page 65, 2 down to 4, Katie. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 7, which is the ETE Capital Programme 2019-20, end of year, quarter 1, 2021. Stuart?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. Again, I know this is a report that you've studied in great detail in the run-up to the finalisation of the paper for today's decision day, so I won't dwell on what is quite a detailed report, but effectively this is the outturn report for the previous financial year in respect to the capital programme. It also recommends that you incorporate some of the new funding that we've received, helpful and welcome funding from the Department of Transport for highway maintenance work. But and the report gives a brief outline of at the end of the first quarter of the capital programme. It's an important report. It covers a wide range of capital projects, which again help to demonstrate the breadth of the work that's done under your portfolio in the department. And capital work is always an important part of the programme of securing the sort of economic success and quality of life in Hampshire that underpins the County Council's overall values. And I suspect, Chairman, that it will become an even more significant feature as government attempts to kickstart economic activity again. The construction sector and the renewal and improvement of infrastructure will be an important part of that. And I think, if I may highlight one final area, the success on delivering cycling and walking and town centre sort of safe distancing pop-up schemes over the last few weeks has really demonstrated how important the infrastructure and the transport infrastructure is to the long-term prosperity of the county. But that's also not to neglect issues like the flood defence programme, which you referred to. And just before we went into the COVID pandemic, we were all poised for another bout of groundwater flooding in Hampshire, which thankfully didn't really materialise on the same scale as 2014, but nevertheless it does highlight the importance of capital works year in, year out to improve flood defence and resilience, as well as improving the transport infrastructure across the county.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stuart. I always find it interesting at these D-Days trying to sort of explain the amount of work and you know that goes into producing this paper and the amount of work that we actually do as an authority. Councillor Simpson, David, you want to make a comment?
Thanks, Rob. Yes, it's just to re-emphasise the work. There was a feasibility study you agreed last year, if you remember, for a new HWRC in Hart, which of course has been put onto the back burner because of COVID and all the work that has had to go into that. Just to keep it alive and put it into the capital programme, this gives me the opportunity. Also, today, you'll notice there's quite a lot of work along the A33 at various junctions. And the one junction missing is by the Wellington statue. And please, please, that is going to be the big snarl up area that's going to come as we improve all the other junctions. This is going to be left out. We need to start putting it into the programme so that we can do something. I know Ridian, Councillor Vaughan, is on board with this because he was the one that wanted me to push it harder. So you've got the two of us on either side of the road, as it were, saying, please do this.
Yeah, okay. All right, noted. I think, Stuart, we probably agree. We're aware of that and having those discussions. So
we absolutely are, Chairman. Councillor Simpson did remind me again of the importance of that scheme at the briefing, and just to reassure Councillor Simpson, only this morning I had a meeting with the team that are dealing with the pop-up schemes, and we discussed some of the wider issues and also that's the team that would be dealing with the road improvement element that relates to the HWRC ideas in your part of the world, Councillor Simpson. So I do assure you it is very much on our radar and is a current topic of conversation. But you're quite right, we have had to pause some of the work that we were doing earlier to concentrate on the pandemic response and some of the immediate issues around the emergency DFT funding, which has to be dispersed fairly quickly. So at the moment, that is a focus of the team's work. We've done the 800,000 and I'm sure Keith will confirm that we're hopeful of receiving the next tranche of funding, which is likely to be several £million, and therefore we really must make sure that we focus on that and get those schemes in place quickly. And I think Hampshire's done pretty well compared to some of our neighbours, at least in terms of getting schemes out on the ground quickly and getting DFT funding spent.
Keith Wilcox, would you make a comment? You're on mute, Keith.
Thank you, Chairman. Just adding to what Stuart has said, I can confirm that we did receive the £863,000 from the DFT, which was our full ask, which was useful. I think if the delivery is going well, there's another 12 schemes due for delivery this week, on top of what we've already delivered over the previous 2 weeks. I think with that track record, we are in a pretty good position to secure in the order of about 3.7 million for tranche 2 from the DFT. But I think it's also worth adding, Chairman, that that is money from the DFT's active travel emergency fund. But there's also money for similar type of schemes coming through from MHCLG that is going direct to the districts and boroughs, of which with across the whole county sums to just over £1 million. So we've not only got the 863 from DFT, you've got the best part of £1 million from MHCLG, plus another 3 points. There is a significant amount of money for schemes that many of them are relatively low cost. So there is a huge amount of work. And in David's team, that is being coordinated across the county and working very closely with our district and borough colleagues. So there is a huge degree. I think industrial production is a word that's springing to mind at the moment.
Thank you for that. I'll make a few comments on that in a minute, and that you Stuart said as well. David Wilson, you had your hand up. You still want to comment? No?
Thank you, Chairman. Keith covered the point on tranche 2 of the DFT funding. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you for that. And I was just going to, as I say, it's always difficult to try and, in a paper like this, explain the amount of work that we are doing. a huge amount of proactive work goes into the programme or delivery with improvements right across Hampshire. I think what Hampshire is very good at, it is very successful in bidding for these funds. We have a very, very good track record, and as Stuart made that point, we're very successful at that. But of course, that's just one part of it. It's all the work that then goes into there, all the assessment, environmental impacts, and then on top of that, the conditions that can be imposed on that funding, and very often the very tight timescales that we have to work to. You mentioned the pop-up scheme, Stuart. I mean, the timescales on that were very, very tight. Sometimes it's difficult then to actually achieve all the consultation that you would like to do as well. So it's a huge thank you to the whole E-team for this. We're very successful. We do deliver schemes. I think even with DfT and central government, we have a very good reputation. And I think that's why they support us, because we do deliver. I think that's a good point to make. And of course, that will almost be enhanced with the work that we're doing through recovery. And I think we're in this period, I think we're calling it now stabilisation. So that, the work that we're doing on the network right across infrastructure is going to be vital to that recovery, and how we're able to sort of try and have that stabilisation as we go forward into full recovery and hopefully all come out the other side. So huge thank you to all the team for all the work that's done, and to you personally, Stuart, as well, for pulling all this together. So very happy to accept the recommendations on this paper. So on page 71 and 72, it's recommendations 3 through to 12, Katie. Thank you very much. Okay, we now move on to agenda item 8, which is the project appraisal for 4 marks, the A31 Lymington Bottom Junction improvements. I don't know who's leading, Stuart.
I can say a few words by way of introduction, Chairman. Again, if there are detailed questions, I'm very pleased to see my colleague David Wilson is with us, and David's team is overseeing the implementation of this. I think this is a relatively straightforward project appraisal, Chairman, for a scheme to improve facilities and amenities at a junction in the centre of Four Marks. It's a long-standing issue that's been identified, and you may remember a while ago we had a meeting with the local member and members of the local community to talk about priorities for transport improvements in Four Marks. I think that's led to a very successful level of engagement with the local community led by David and his team. And whilst we continue to try to make progress on some of the other projects that the village would also like to see come forward, but where there are various constraints, including land ownership ones, this scheme, I think, is accepted and supported locally and seen as an important additional improvement for the area. And I think, as I say, Chairman, it's relatively straightforward project appraisal. It comes to you for a decision because of the value of the scheme involved, rather than because there's any particular concerns.
Thank you for that. And also I'd like to thank David Wilson in terms of the work that he's done discussing with local members as well. And I know there is agreement and support. So very pleased to see this going forward as well. So very happy to accept the recommendations as set out on page 95, 2 through to 5, Katie. Thank you. Okay, another project appraisal. We have agenda item 9. This is the Bramley Lane, Shilford Road Junction, Bramley. Stuart?
Yes, Chairman, again, hopefully a relatively straightforward project appraisal. This is an improvement scheme that I think has long been sought and will improve matters at the junction. Partly funded by a grant, which I think has been secured by the Parish Council through, I believe, SIL or Section 106 contributions held locally. Yeah. But it's an important project to make a necessary local improvement there at this junction, and I believe it's supported by all concerned. Indeed, the scheme was initiated by Bramley Parish Council themselves in relation to concerns about issues at this area, which is related to delays at the level crossing. And I think this improvement scheme would be welcomed by all.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. And it's nice to hear you get agreement right across the board, and that, yet again, partnership working with the parish councils and gaining their support. And it's good that we have those links and those communications with them as well and their input. So very pleased to support the recommendations on this paper. On pages 109, just running into 110, the recommendations are set out from 1 through to 5, Katie. Thank you. Okay, so we have a further project appraisal, agenda item 10, which is the A33 South Drive Junction Improvement, Sherford on Long, Stuart.
Yes, again, Chairman, relatively straightforward project appraisal, I believe. Councillor Simpson was kind enough to refer to it earlier. This is improving one of the other side road junctions on the A33 route in North Hampshire. It's a important scheme. It's funded by developer contributions, and I believe that it's locally supported and complements the County Council's long-standing programme of improvements on the A33, both through Basingstoke and moving out on this, what is a very important route. And having driven it recently, taking my daughter to Reading earlier in the week, I was able to do a site visit at the same time.
Very efficient, Stuart. Well done. Councillor Simpson, you're not down to speak. Did you want to make a comment on this as you made reference to it?
No, thank you very much, Chairman. As I mentioned that and the Bramley one a bit before, I'm just looking forward to when we can put a new roundabout in a bit further up.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. I will. As I say, I'm very pleased to support this, and it's another project going forward. So happy to accept the recommendations on page 1 to 5, from 2 through to 5, Katie. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 11, another project appraisal. This is the Whitehill Bourne Relief Road, junction 2, 2 to 3, the shared use footway and cycleway, Stuart.
Yes, Chairman, this is coming forward now because it was originally expected that this part of the shared footway cycleway would be delivered by the developer as part of the build out of the Whitehill and Borden area. That the development has not come forward as quickly as originally anticipated, Chairman, and therefore it's suggested that it would be appropriate for the County Council to step in and basically complete the missing link in this route and make the appropriate financial arrangements with the developer around that. I think the scheme has been very successfully negotiated. It's a good scheme, and there's a lot of demand for filling in the missing bit of that continuous route on the new relief road, and it's therefore commended to you, Chairman, for approval.
Thank you, Stuart. I think it's like many of the schemes we're doing, there's been a significant investment into cycling and walking, and this is yet another scheme of the value just under £700,000, I think. And I know there's been a lot of discussions with yet again the local members of town council and the district council as well. So I'm sure this is welcomed by everybody as well, as you say, filling in that link. I don't have anybody down to speak on this one unless they want to. Can't see anybody. So happy to accept the recommendations as set out on page 137 of 2 down to number 5, Katie. Thank you. Okay, we'll now move on to the last agenda item 12. This is the Partnership for South Hampshire. It's just a revised agreement, Stuart. Just a very brief note.
Yes, Chairman. This basically the Partnership for South Hampshire is a joint committee under the Local Government Act and operates to a constitution which sets out its terms of reference and means of engagement. Because of some changes in the membership of that group, most notably the Isle of Wight decision to no longer be a member of the partnership, and the extension of the area of the partnership to incorporate the whole of the New Forest, which coincided with the changes to the LEP boundary, it was necessary to change the joint agreement. It is a requirement of the Constitution that the joint agreement, any changes have to be individually authorised by each of the participating local authorities. There were no further changes other than some minor technical improvements and just updating of some of the provisions of the agreement generally. So happy to commend it to you, Chairman. I know this is also going on to the executive member for PNR, who I believe may have some views about the future basis of transport of Partnership for South Hampshire meetings. But that doesn't affect the content of your report. And unless Susie wants to add anything, I'm indebted to colleagues in legal services who kept a very close eye on the development of the joint agreement changes to make sure that they did accurately reflect the changes in the partnership, but didn't need to have anything, bring in any other provisions.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I don't see you wanting to speak, Susie. So you're happy. Did you want to make a comment, Susie? Yes.
Yeah, it was only to say it's being passed over to the leader simply because of the potential to cross across the portfolios. That's the only reason that we're recommending that in this report here.
Okay. All right, that's great. Thank you very much. So really, it's more procedural to line ourselves up with the new arrangements with the Isle of Wight leaving as well. So, well, thank you very much for that, Stuart. So happy to accept the recommendations Katie has set out on 149, 2 to 3. So that brings us to the end of the agenda items on this, which were 12 on this time, which I think were the largest number we've had. I would just really like to thank Councillor Simpson and Councillor Oppenheimer for attending and for their input, and for officers that have spoken and all the officers that attend on the meeting. It's nice to know that I have all those faces there in support, and I know an awful lot of work that goes into there. And thanks to Katie as well for keeping me in order and making sure everything runs smoothly. So I'm going to draw the meeting to a close, and it's just a finally thank you all for attending. Thank you very much.
Thank you.